The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be here today with some of my colleagues from Atlantic Caucus, all 32 of us, and many of us have been here this morning, and for those of us that weren't here, they were busy doing work for their constituents in parliamentary affairs throughout Parliament today, so they were working hard for their constituents. But get to the order of the day. I'm pleased to be rising in the House to speak on the opposition motion moved by the member from Niagara Falls, which does deal with the regional representation on the Supreme Court and in particular Atlantic Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada is something that affects all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. A rigorous appointment process is thus of the utmost importance to ensure Canadians of all walks of life can be represented in this important institution. Our government has committed to an open, transparent, accountable process to appoint jurists of the highest caliber who are functionally bilingual and representative of the diversity of our great country. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to discuss what exactly this will mean for the constituents of my riding of the Long Range Mountains in Newfoundland and Labrador. My constituents voted for change, clearly. That change means a functional, effective, and representative government that respects the institutions of our country and our regional diversity. Atlantic Canada's representation on the Supreme Court bench is just one example only of the new tone Newfoundland and Labrador can expect from this government. Our position on the motion, presented by the Minister of Justice, is one that I am proud to take to my constituents and all Canadians everywhere. When appointing Supreme Court justices, the former Conservative government used an opaque, outdated process that desperately needed overhaul. Canadians had limited information about the nominees, and the criteria for their selection was unclear. Mr. Speaker, we heard from Canadians the frustration they felt with the way the former government operated. We listened to Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We heard their concerns, and we campaigned on a platform of open and transparent government. In this case, that means when selecting justices for the Supreme Court, our government will make public the members of the Independent Advisory Board, the assessment criteria, the questionnaire that all applicants must answer, and certain answers provided by the questionnaire by the Prime Minister's eventual nominee. Not only that, the Minister of Justice and the Chair of the Advisory Board will appear before the Parliament to discuss the selection process. A number of members of Parliament and senators from all parties will also have the opportunity to take place in a question and answer session with the eventual nominee before he or she joins the bench. That means that members of Parliament can truly represent their constituents in this process of utmost importance for our region. My hometown of Newfoundland and Labrador has its own unique issues, as well as all of Atlantic Canada. Mr. Speaker, I have one of the largest ridings in the country. My riding of the Long Range Mountains starts on the southwest coast of the island, taking in little communities of Grey River and Channel Port aux Basques, then runs along the Great Northern Peninsula to St. Lenaire and Griquet. When I mention the size of my riding, it's not just as a geography lesson for the members across the aisle about a region of the country they forgot about their time in power, but it's just to give folks a scale of the region. To drive to Channel Port aux Basques is about 700 kilometres, or 9 hours. If I go to the areas on the south, it's a 6-hour boat ride. With all due respect, some members from other parts of the country might not realize the sheer size of Atlantic Canada, and why this is just only an example. It highlights the desire and importance to have somebody on the bench who can understand the unique challenges and issues that come up with dealing with court cases at the Supreme Court. The regional perspective is crucial and so important when it comes to future members of the bench. As I said earlier, the Supreme Court has a direct effect on every part of the country, but there are very few numbers of areas in the country where federal government decisions can have such an impact on people's daily lives. People from Atlantic Canada understand the reality. One of the largest industries is the fishery in my riding. Because of that, when I speak with my constituents, as I did on wharves and stages all summer, one thing was always clear to them are the decisions made by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. I raise this, Mr. Speaker, because I find it interesting that the members opposite have suddenly developed an interest in Atlantic Canada. They've suddenly decided Atlantic Canada is important to them. I find it ironic that this recognition was missing for 10 years while they were in government. It was clear they didn't understand or recognize the importance of the Long Range Mountains. And, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to